The evening air carried the scent of jasmine and impending rain as Elena Martinez pulled her modest sedan through the iron gates of the Salvatore estate. She had driven past this property countless times, always wondering what lay beyond the towering stone walls that seemed to stretch endlessly along the coastal highway. Now, as the gates closed behind her with an ominous clang, she was about to find out. The driveway alone seemed to go on for miles, winding through manicured gardens that probably cost more to maintain than most people earned in a year. Elena gripped the steering wheel tighter, reminding herself why she was here. This job, if she could pull it off, would save her struggling event planning business and cover her grandmother's medical bills for the next 6 months. Isabella Salvatore had found Elena through a referral, calling her office 3 weeks ago with an opportunity that seemed too good to be true. A charity gala for 200 guests, unlimited budget, complete creative freedom. Elena should have known then that something was off. Nobody offered unlimited budgets, especially not for charity events. But desperation had a way of making people overlook red flags, and Elena was nothing if not desperate. Her business, dreams and details event planning had been hemorrhaging clients ever since the Marco wedding disaster, an event that had gone wrong through no fault of her own but had somehow destroyed her reputation anyway. This Salvatore Gala was her chance at redemption, her opportunity to prove that she could handle high-stakes events with grace and professionalism. The mansion finally came into view, and Elena's breath caught in her throat. It was not just a house but a statement, a declaration of power rendered in stone and glass. 3 stories of Italian Renaissance architecture rose against the darkening sky, with wings extending in both directions like a bird of prey spreading its wings. Warm light glowed from dozens of windows, and Elena could see the silhouettes of people moving inside. Her phone buzzed with a text from Isabella. "Park anywhere. Come to the side entrance. Thank you for coming on such short notice." Elena had barely sent a confirmation when another text arrived. "And Elena, whatever you see or hear tonight, please keep to yourself. My brother values discretion." Brother. Isabella had mentioned him only once during their initial consultation, referring to him simply as the head of the household, who would need to approve all final decisions. Elena had imagined some stuffy aristocrat or maybe a tech mogul obsessed with privacy. She parked near what appeared to be the side entrance, grabbed her portfolio and tablet, and stepped out into the cooling evening air. The sound of raised voices drifted from somewhere beyond the garden hedge, and Elena hesitated. This was a private estate and she was essentially a stranger here. The professional thing to do would be to go directly to the entrance and wait for Isabella. But curiosity had always been Elena's weakness, coupled with a journalist's instinct inherited from her late father. She found herself drawn toward the voices, moving quietly along the stone path that curved around the hedge. She told herself she would just glance, just make sure everything was all right, then go straight to her meeting. The path opened into a courtyard dominated by a fountain, and that was when Elena saw them. 6 men stood in a loose circle, their postures aggressive, their voices low but intense. Even from a distance, Elena could feel the danger radiating from the scene like heat from asphalt in summer. The man at the center commanded attention without effort. He was tall, perhaps 6'3", with dark hair pushed back from a face that could have been carved from marble. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than Elena's car, and even in the dim garden lighting she could see the cold fury in his eyes. This, she knew instinctively, was Isabella's brother. The man who had built this empire, whatever it was. The man whose approval she needed for this job. And right now he looked like he was about to commit murder. "You come into my home," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the courtyard despite its quiet intensity. "You sit at my table, you drink my wine, and then you insult me with this offer? Do I look like a fool to you, Victor?" The man he addressed, a blonde with sharp features and a scar running along his jawline, smiled without warmth. "I am merely presenting options, Dante. The Petrov family believes in collaboration, not confrontation. But if you prefer the old ways, we can certainly accommodate that preference as well." Dante. So that was his name. Elena should have left then, should have backed away slowly and pretended she had seen nothing. But she was frozen, transfixed by the scene unfolding before her. This was not a business disagreement between legitimate entrepreneurs. The weapons poorly concealed beneath jackets, the way the men positioned themselves with military precision, the casual discussion of violence, it all pointed to one conclusion. Isabella's family was not in the technology business or finance or real estate, at least not exclusively. They were something else entirely, something dangerous and probably illegal. "The old ways," Dante repeated, his tone mocking. "You mean the ways where men kept their word? Where loyalty meant something? where we did not pretend to be something we are not. He stepped closer to Victor, and Elena saw the other men tense. Take your offer back to your father, Victor. Tell him the Salvatore family does not negotiate with threats. Tell him we remember what happened to the Romano family when they tried to expand into our territory. Tell him we have longer memories and deeper pockets. Victor's smile never wavered, but something flickered in his eyes. Fear, perhaps, or calculation. You are making a mistake, Dante. The world is changing. The families that refuse to adapt will find themselves extinct. Then let us die on our feet rather than live on our knees, Dante replied. Marco, show our guest out. And make sure he understands that next time he visits without an invitation, we will consider it an act of war. Elena knew she needed to leave immediately. This was not her world, not her business, and definitely not something she wanted to be involved in. She took one careful step backward, then another. Her heel caught on the edge of the stone path, and she stumbled, her hand shooting out to catch herself against the hedge. The rustle of leaves seemed impossibly loud in the tense silence. Every head in the courtyard turned toward her hiding spot. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Dante spoke, his voice like ice. Who is there? Show yourself. Now. Elena's mind raced. She could run, but where? The gates were closed, and she had no idea how to open them. She could hide, but they had clearly heard her, and how long could she realistically evade trained killers on their own property? The only option left was the truth, or at least a version of it. She stepped out from behind the hedge, raising her hands slightly in a gesture of peace, her portfolio clutched to her chest like a shield. I am so sorry, she said, proud that her voice remained steady despite the terror coursing through her. I did not mean to intrude. I am Elena Martinez. I have an appointment with Isabella Salvatore about the charity gala. I was looking for the side entrance and got turned around in the gardens. 6 pairs of eyes assessed her with varying degrees of suspicion and interest. But it was Dante's gaze that held her frozen, pinned in place like a butterfly on a collector's board. He studied her for a long moment, taking in her simple black dress, her sensible heels, her professional portfolio. Then his eyes met hers, and Elena felt something shift in the air between them, a recognition that went beyond the immediate situation. The event planner, Dante said finally. Isabella mentioned she had hired someone. She neglected to mention the appointment was tonight. He glanced at Marco, a man with kind eyes and silver threading through his dark hair. See Mr. Petrov out. Then bring Miss Martinez to the house. It seems we need to have a conversation about discretion and appropriate boundaries. Victor shot Elena a look that made her blood run cold before allowing himself to be escorted away. The other men dispersed like smoke, leaving Elena alone with Dante in the courtyard. He approached her slowly, each step measured and deliberate. Elena forced herself to stand her ground, to meet his gaze without flinching. She had not survived 26 years in a tough world by showing weakness to bullies, even if this particular bully probably had more power in his little finger than she had in her entire life. So, Dante said when he stood barely 3 feet away, my sister hired an event planner. How very domestic of her. And what, exactly, did you see and hear just now, Miss Martinez? I saw a business disagreement, Elena replied carefully. I heard 2 men with different perspectives on how to conduct their affairs. Nothing more, nothing less. A ghost of a smile touched Dante's lips. A diplomatic answer. Tell me, do you make a habit of eavesdropping on private conversations? I make a habit of being early to appointments and trying to find the correct entrance when directions are vague, Elena countered. I apologize for the intrusion. If you would prefer to cancel the event planning contract, I understand completely. I can be gone in 5 minutes. Cancel? Dante's smile widened, though it did not reach his eyes. No, Miss Martinez. I do not think we will be canceling anything. In fact, I insist you stay. Please come inside. I find myself very interested in discussing this gala with you. Isabella has such interesting taste in vendors. There was something in his tone that sent warning signals racing down Elena's spine. This was not a simple business discussion he was proposing. This was an interrogation, an assessment, possibly worse. But what choice did she have? She had seen too much, heard too much. If she tried to leave now, would they even let her? Elena thought of her grandmother, waiting at home with her medications and her stories and her unwavering faith that Elena would make something of herself. She thought of her struggling business, her mounting debts, her dreams of security and success. She thought of her father, who had taught her that courage was not the absence of fear but the decision to move forward despite it. I would be honored to discuss the gala with you, Elena said, lifting her chin slightly. Lead the way, Mr. Salvatore. Dante's eyes flickered with something that might have been respect or might have been amusement. He gestured toward the mansion, and Elena fell into step beside him, her heels clicking against the stone path. They entered through a side door that led into a hallway lined with art that probably belonged in museums. Elena recognized a Caravaggio, a Monet, several pieces she could not identify but knew must be priceless. This was old money, serious money, the kind of wealth that bought not just things but power and silence and protection. Marco met them in the hallway, his expression concerned when he saw Elena. "Boss, Isabella is in the ballroom with the decorating crew. She is asking for Miss Martinez." "The ballroom can wait," Dante replied. "Miss Martinez and I need to have a private conversation first. Tell my sister I will send her new planner along shortly, assuming our discussion goes well." Marco shot Elena a look that might have been sympathetic before nodding and disappearing down another corridor. Dante led Elena deeper into the house, finally stopping at a set of ornate double doors. He pushed them open to reveal a ballroom that took Elena's breath away despite her fear. It was magnificent, a space that could have hosted royal coronations. Crystal chandeliers hung from a ceiling painted with elaborate frescoes. The floor was polished marble reflecting light like water. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over gardens that seemed to extend forever. But Elena's attention was not on the decor. Instead, she noticed the 20 or so men scattered throughout the space, all of them turning to look as Dante entered with her at his side. She recognized the type instantly, men who made their living through violence and intimidation, soldiers in whatever organization Dante commanded. The room fell silent, the air thick with curiosity and suspicion. Dante walked to the center of the ballroom, his footsteps echoing. Elena followed, aware of every eye tracking her movement. When Dante turned to face her, his expression was unreadable. "Miss Martinez," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the cavernous space, "you find yourself in a unique position. You have seen things tonight that very few outsiders see and live to discuss. You have heard names and details that could be quite valuable to certain interested parties. I need to know who you are, who you work for, and why you are really here." "I already told you," Elena said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I am an event planner. Isabella hired me to organize a charity gala. I have all the contracts and emails in my portfolio if you would like to verify. Contracts can be forged. Emails can be manufactured. Isabella is young and sometimes naive about the world beyond these walls. Tell me, Miss Martinez, have you ever heard of the Petrov family?" "No." "The Romano family?" "No." "The Chicago outfit? The Commission? The Five Families?" Elena shook her head to each question, genuinely confused. She had heard of organized crime in abstract terms like something from movies or television, but these specific names meant nothing to her. She could see Dante assessing her reactions, looking for tells that might indicate she was lying. After a long moment he seemed to reach some kind of conclusion. "Very well," he said. "Let us assume for now that you are what you claim to be, an innocent event planner who stumbled into something beyond her understanding. That still leaves us with a problem, Miss Martinez. You are now a security risk. You know too much. The question is what to do about that." Fear spiked through Elena's chest, but she refused to show it. "I can sign a non-disclosure agreement. I can promise to forget everything I saw and heard. I have no interest in your business dealings, Mr. Salvatore. I just want to plan a successful event, get paid, and move on with my life." "Promises?" Dante said softly. "NDAs. Such fragile things when real pressure is applied. No, Miss Martinez, I think we need a more effective solution." He paused, his eyes never leaving hers, and then he said the words that would change everything, "Dance with me." Elena blinked. "I am sorry, what?" "You heard me. Dance with me. Right now, right here. If you are truly just an event planner, if you have nothing to fear and nothing to hide, then you will have no problem with a simple dance. But if you refuse, if you try to run, then I will know you are lying, and I will have to take more permanent measures to ensure your silence." The room seemed to hold its breath. Elena saw the men around them back away, creating a circle of empty space. No one wanted to be near whatever was about to happen. "Dance with me or I will lose my patience," the unspoken threat hung in the air like a blade. This was a test, Elena realized, a way for Dante to assess her character and her truthfulness through proximity and reaction. If she was a spy or a plant, she would be trained to resist physical intimidation. She would show signs of professional composure under pressure. But if she was genuinely an innocent civilian thrust into a terrifying situation, she would react differently. Elena set her portfolio down on a nearby chair, moving slowly and deliberately. Her hands were shaking slightly and she did not try to hide it. Let him see her fear. Let him see that she was exactly what she claimed to be, a woman in over her head who was doing her best to survive. She walked to the center of the ballroom where Dante waited, stopping just beyond arm's reach. I should warn you, she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded, I am not a very good dancer. My grandmother tried to teach me salsa, but I have 2 left feet. Something flickered in Dante's expression, too quick to identify. He extended his hand and after a moment's hesitation, Elena took it. His palm was warm, his grip firm but not painful. With his other hand he found her waist, pulling her closer than was strictly proper for a waltz. Elena placed her free hand on his shoulder, feeling the muscle beneath the expensive fabric of his suit. Music started from somewhere, a slow classical piece that Elena did not recognize. Dante began to move, and Elena followed as best she could, stumbling slightly over the first few steps. She was acutely aware of everything, the eyes watching them from all sides, the warmth of Dante's body close to hers, the subtle scent of his cologne mixing with something else, something dangerous and masculine and entirely him. Tell me about yourself, Miss Martinez, Dante said quietly as they moved across the marble floor. Where did you grow up? Newark, Elena replied. My parents died when I was 8. My grandmother raised me. And your business? Dreams and details? How long have you been running it? 3 years. It has been difficult, but I am building a reputation. Building or rebuilding? Dante's question was sharp. I had you investigated after Isabella mentioned hiring you. The Marco wedding 6 months ago. It was all over the society pages and not in a flattering way. Elena's steps faltered, but Dante's grip steadied her. Of course he had investigated her. A man in his position would never allow a stranger into his home without thorough vetting. The Marco wedding was sabotaged, Elena said, anger creeping into her voice despite her fear. The bride's ex-boyfriend paid off my vendors. Nothing I could have prevented, but my reputation suffered anyway. Yet you continued. You did not give up, did not close your business. Why? Because I do not quit, Elena said, meeting his gaze directly. Because my grandmother needs me. Because I have dreams that do not die just because things get difficult. For the first time since they had started dancing, Dante smiled genuinely. It transformed his face, softening the hard edges, revealing the man beneath the monster. Dreams that do not die, he repeated. I understand that sentiment, Miss Martinez. More than you might think. They danced in silence for several more turns around the floor. Elena was gradually relaxing into the rhythm, her steps becoming more confident. She was hyper-aware of Dante's hand on her waist, the way his thumb brushed against the fabric of her dress. There was something electric in the contact, something that went beyond fear or intimidation. Despite everything, despite knowing what he was and what he was capable of, Elena felt an unwelcome flutter of attraction. You are doing better, Dante observed. Perhaps you are a better dancer than you thought. Or perhaps I have a good partner, Elena replied before she could stop herself. Dante's eyes widened slightly, and Elena saw several of the watching men exchange glances. Apparently, people did not usually compliment Dante Salvatore to his face. The music swelled toward a crescendo, and Dante spun Elena outward before pulling her back closer than before. When they stopped, her hand was pressed flat against his chest, and she could feel his heartbeat beneath her palm, strong and steady. I believe you, Dante said quietly, so only she could hear. You are not a spy, not a plant. You are exactly what you claim to be, an unfortunate woman in the wrong place at the wrong time. Relief flooded through Elena so intensely that her knees went weak. Dante's arm tightened around her waist, supporting her. Thank you, she whispered. Do not thank me yet, Dante replied. Because believing you does not solve my problem, Miss Martinez. You still know too much. You still represent a risk. Which means you will be staying here at the estate until the gala is complete. You will continue your work with Isabella, you will plan your event, and you will be under the protection and supervision of my people at all times. Consider it protective custody. Elena pulled back, staring at him. You are making me a prisoner? I am keeping you safe, Dante corrected. Victor Petrov saw you tonight. By now he knows who you are and where you live. He will assume you heard something valuable, and he will send people to extract that information. Here, under my roof, you are protected. Out there you are a target. I'm offering you a choice, Miss Martinez. Accept my protection and complete your job, or take your chances on your own. But choose quickly because my patience, as I mentioned earlier, has limits. Elena's mind raced through her options. She could refuse, could insist on going home, but everything Dante said made a horrible kind of sense. If this Viktor Petrov was half as dangerous as he seemed, if he really did believe Elena had overheard something important, then she was indeed in danger. But staying here, in this house full of criminals, working for a man who could order someone killed with a snap of his fingers, that was its own kind of danger. My grandmother, Elena said finally. She is elderly and on multiple medications. She needs daily care. I cannot just disappear without explanation. Your grandmother will be cared for, Dante said immediately. I will send my personal physician to her home tomorrow to assess her needs. She will receive round-the-clock nursing care until you return. You have my word on this. The word of a criminal, Elena said before she could stop herself. The men around the ballroom tensed, hands moving toward weapons. But Dante laughed, a genuine sound of amusement that seemed to surprise everyone, including himself. The word of a criminal, he agreed. But criminals, Miss Martinez, have a code. We value loyalty, honor, family. When I give my word, I keep it because my word is my bond in a world where contracts are meaningless. Your grandmother will be safer under my protection than she would be on her own, should Victor decide to use her as leverage. The implication was clear and terrifying. But Elena could also see the logic. She had walked into a war she did not understand, and now both sides would see her as a potential asset or liability. At least here with Dante she knew where she stood. All right, Elena said finally. I will stay. I will plan your gala. But I want your word on several things. My grandmother receives the best medical care available. I am allowed to call her daily. I am treated with respect by your men, no threats, no intimidation beyond what has already occurred. And when this is over, when the gala is complete, I walk away free and clear with my payment in full. No further involvement in your world, no future obligations. Dante studied her for a long moment, respect growing in his eyes. You negotiate well for someone who has no leverage, Miss Martinez. Very well, you have my word on all counts. Marco, he called out, and his right-hand man immediately appeared at his side. Please show Miss Martinez to the East Wing guest suite. Have someone collect her things from her car and arrange for her vehicle to be stored securely. Starting tomorrow, she will be working with Isabella on the gala preparations. She is under our protection, which means anyone who harms her or speaks to her disrespectfully answers to me personally. Make sure everyone understands. Yes, boss, Marco said. He offered Elena a small, sympathetic smile. This way, Miss Martinez. I promise the accommodations are quite comfortable. Elena followed Marco toward the doors, but something made her look back. Dante stood in the center of the ballroom, hands in his pockets, watching her leave. Their eyes met across the distance, and Elena felt that strange electric pull again. This was dangerous, she knew. Not just the situation but the man himself. Dante Salvatore was everything she should fear and avoid. A criminal, a killer, a man who existed in a world of violence and shadow. But there was something else there too, something in the way he had held her while they danced, in the way he had smiled when she showed her courage, in the way he had immediately agreed to protect her grandmother. As Elena turned away and followed Marco into the corridor, she could not shake the feeling that her life had just changed forever. The question was whether that change would destroy her or transform her. Only time would tell. The guest suite was more luxurious than any hotel Elena had ever stayed in, which admittedly was not saying much given her limited budget over the years. But even by objective standards, the space was impressive. A four-poster bed dominated the room, dressed in cream silk linens that probably cost more than her monthly rent. French doors opened onto a private balcony overlooking the gardens. The bathroom alone was larger than Elena's entire apartment, featuring a soaking tub, a separate shower with multiple heads and marble countertops that seemed to stretch forever. Elena stood at the window, staring out at the moonlit grounds, trying to process everything that had happened in the last few hours. She had come here to discuss centerpieces and seating charts. Now she was essentially a prisoner in a Mafia Don's mansion, her life hanging by the thread of his goodwill and his word. Her phone buzzed in her pocket and she pulled it out to see a text from her grandmother. Working late, Mija? Do not forget to eat something. Love you. Elena's throat tightened. How was she supposed to explain this? She could not exactly text back that she had accidentally witnessed a mob negotiation and was now under the protection of a crime boss who also happened to be disturbingly attractive. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Miss Martinez? It is Marco. May I come in? Elena opened the door to find Dante's right-hand man holding a suitcase she recognized as her emergency overnight bag from her car trunk. Behind him, a young woman carried a tray laden with food. I thought you might be hungry, Marco said with a kind smile. Rosa is our head cook. She has prepared something light since it is late, but if you need anything else just let us know. The cook, a round woman with warm eyes and graying hair, set the tray on a small table near the window. "You eat, Bella?" she said in heavily accented English. "You look too thin. Tomorrow I make you proper breakfast, yes?" Despite everything, Elena found herself smiling. "Thank you, Rosa. This looks wonderful." When they left, Elena forced herself to eat the pasta and salad Rosa had prepared. It was delicious and she realized she had not eaten since lunch nearly 10 hours ago. As she ate, she opened her laptop and began reviewing her notes for the gala. If she was going to be stuck here, she might as well do the job she had been hired for. The work was familiar, comforting in its normalcy. Floral arrangements, lighting design, entertainment options, menu selection. These were problems Elena knew how to solve, unlike the impossible situation she found herself in. She worked until nearly 2 in the morning before exhaustion finally claimed her. She fell asleep in the enormous bed, her dreams filled with dark eyes and dangerous smiles and the memory of a dance that had felt like both a threat and a promise. The next 3 weeks fell into an unexpected rhythm. Elena woke each morning to breakfast prepared by Rosa, who seemed to have made it her personal mission to fatten Elena up. She would spend her mornings working with Isabella, who turned out to be delightful, smart, funny, with none of her brother's intimidating intensity. Isabella was 24, a recent graduate from Princeton, and she genuinely wanted to make a difference with this gala, which would benefit children's literacy programs in underserved communities. "Dante thinks I am naive," Isabella said one morning as they reviewed catering options. "He thinks I do not understand what our family is or what he does. But I understand perfectly. I just refuse to believe that is all we can be." Elena was beginning to understand the family dynamics. Dante had inherited control of the Salvatore empire when their father, Antonio, suffered a stroke 5 years ago. The old man was still alive, still living in the west wing of the mansion, but his mind came and went. Dante had been groomed for leadership his entire life, trained in violence and strategy and the ruthless calculations required to survive in their world. Isabella had been sheltered, sent away to boarding schools and universities, protected from the worst of it. Now she was trying to use her family's resources and influence to create something positive, and despite his skepticism, Dante supported her efforts. "He is not a bad man," Isabella said quietly one afternoon when Elena asked about her brother. "People see the monster he has to be to survive, but they do not see the man underneath. He took on this burden so I would not have to. He has done terrible things so I could have a normal life. How can I judge him for that?" Elena saw different sides of Dante as the days passed. In the mornings he was all business, holding meetings in his office with various men who came and went. Elena learned to recognize the hierarchy. Marco was his second, his most trusted advisor and friend since childhood. Then came the capos, men who controlled different aspects of the operation. Below them, the soldiers, the enforcers, the men who did the actual dirty work. Dante ruled them all with a combination of fear and loyalty, demanding excellence but also protecting those who served him faithfully. In the evenings, Dante often dined with Elena and Isabella. At first, these dinners were tense, with Elena hyper-aware of every word she spoke. But gradually the atmosphere relaxed. Dante had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he was not playing the role of the boss. He was well-read, with opinions on everything from Italian cinema to American foreign policy. He spoke 4 languages fluently and could discuss philosophy and art with the same ease he discussed business strategy. Elena found herself looking forward to these dinners more than she should. There was something magnetic about Dante, a charisma that went beyond mere physical attraction. He listened when people spoke, really listened, giving his full attention in a way that made the speaker feel valued. He had strong opinions but was open to debate, even seeming to enjoy when Elena challenged his viewpoints. And occasionally, when he smiled at something she said, Elena felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the wine Rosa always served. It was during the 3rd week that things shifted. Elena was in the library one evening, a magnificent room lined floor to ceiling with books in multiple languages, working on final seating arrangements for the gala. The event was just 2 weeks away and despite the unusual circumstances, it was shaping up to be spectacular. Isabella had invited an impressive array of guests, politicians, business leaders, celebrities, all interested in supporting literacy programs and none aware that their host family had connections to organized crime. "You are working late again," Dante's voice came from the doorway, making Elena jump. She looked up to find him leaning against the frame, jacket off, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up to reveal surprisingly muscular forearms. He looked tired but approachable, more human than usual. "I want everything to be perfect," Elena said, gesturing at her color-coded seating chart. Your sister deserves a flawless event after all the work she has put into this cause. Dante entered the library, moving to the sideboard where he poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey. He held up a second glass, offering silently, and Elena surprised herself by nodding. He brought the drinks over, settling into the chair across from her work table. Tell me honestly, he said after a moment. Are you afraid of me, Elena? It was the first time he had used her first name, and the sound of it in his deep voice did strange things to her pulse. She considered lying, considered giving the safe answer, but something about the quiet intimacy of the moment made her choose honesty instead. Sometimes, she admitted, when I remember what you are capable of. But other times no. Other times you are just a man who cares about his sister, who has good taste in wine, who appreciates Caravaggio and debates foreign policy at dinner. Those times I forget to be afraid. Dante studied her over the rim of his glass. And which version do you prefer? I do not know that my preference matters, Elena replied. You are both versions, are you not? The monster and the man. You do not get one without the other. A wise observation. Dante took a sip of his whiskey. Most people see only what they want to see, only one side or the other. Very few have the courage or insight to acknowledge the duality. Is it courage or just desperation? Elena asked. I am in your house, under your control, dependent on your goodwill for my safety and my grandmother's care. Maybe I am just trying to humanize my captor to make my situation more bearable. Perhaps, Dante acknowledged. Or perhaps you see me clearly because you have no choice but to look beyond the surface. Tell me about your grandmother. You call her every night, but you never mention her name. Rosa, Elena said with a soft smile. Rosa Maria Martinez. She came from Cuba when she was 20, barely speaking English, nothing but the clothes on her back and a dream of a better life. She worked 3 jobs to support my mother, put her through school. When my parents died in a car accident, she took me in without hesitation, even though she was already 60 and should have been thinking about retirement. She is the strongest person I know. She raised you well, Dante said. You have her strength. I see it in the way you carry yourself, the way you refused to be cowed that first night. Do you know how many people would have collapsed under that pressure? But you stood your ground, negotiated your terms. It was impressive. Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks at the compliment. I was terrified. I know. That is what made it impressive. Courage is not the absence of fear, Elena. It is the decision to act despite the fear. You have more of it than most of the men in my organization. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their drinks. Elena found herself studying Dante's face, the strong line of his jaw, the slight shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and heavy burdens. There was a scar above his right eyebrow, barely visible but there if you looked closely. She wondered what story lay behind it. May I ask you something? Elena said finally. And please, feel free to not answer if the question is too personal or inappropriate. Dante gestured for her to continue, curiosity evident in his expression. Why this life? You are clearly intelligent, educated, capable. You could have been anything, done anything. Why choose to be what you are? For a long moment, Dante did not respond. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost sad. Choose is an interesting word. I did not choose this life, Elena. I was born into it. My great-grandfather came to America in 1920, a simple fisherman looking for opportunity. He got involved with the wrong people, made the wrong deals, and before he knew it, he was part of an organization. He passed that legacy to my grandfather, who passed it to my father, who passed it to me. By the time I was old enough to understand what it meant, I was already in too deep. And even if I wanted to walk away, which I do not, there is Isabella to think about. She deserves a chance at a normal life, at choosing her own path. I carry this burden so she does not have to. That is remarkably selfless for a man who is supposed to be a monster, Elena observed. Dante's laugh was bitter. Do not mistake practicality for selflessness. Isabella is my only family that matters. Protecting her is not noble, it is necessary. Without something to protect, without something to care for beyond survival, a man becomes truly monstrous. She keeps me human. And what happens when she does not need your protection anymore? When she is married, has her own family? Then I suppose I will find out what kind of monster I truly am, Dante said quietly. He drained his whiskey and stood. It is late. You should rest. The gala is in 2 weeks, and Isabella will work you mercilessly to ensure every detail is perfect. Elena watched him walk toward the door, and before she could stop herself, she called out, Dante? He turned, eyebrows raised at her familiar use of his name. Thank you for keeping your word about my grandmother. The doctor you sent, the nurse, they have been wonderful. She is better cared for now than she was before any of this happened. Something softened in Dante's expression. I told you, Elena. When I give my word, I keep it. Always. He paused at the doorway. Sleep well. After he left, Elena sat alone in the library for another hour, her work forgotten, her mind swirling with thoughts she should not be having about a man she definitely should not be thinking about. This was dangerous territory, she knew. Dante Salvatore was not a romantic prospect. He was a criminal, a killer, a man whose world operated by rules that would destroy anyone foolish enough to care about him. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally were two different things. And Elena's heart was starting to ignore what her head knew to be true. The crisis came 4 days before the gala. Elena was in the ballroom with Isabella and the decorating crew, overseeing the installation of the elaborate floral arrangements she had designed. Everything was coming together beautifully. The space looked like something from a fairy tale, elegant and sophisticated with just enough drama to make it memorable. Isabella was practically glowing with excitement, already planning the follow-up events she wanted to organize. Marco appeared at the ballroom entrance, his expression grave. He caught Elena's eye and gestured for her to come with him. Something in his face made her stomach drop. What is wrong? She asked as soon as they were in the corridor. We have a situation, Marco said quietly. Viktor Petrov has been watching the house. We think he is planning to make a move soon, possibly to grab you as leverage against Dante. The boss wants you moved to a more secure location until after the gala. Fear shot through Elena like ice water. More secure? Where? There is a safe house about an hour from here. It is off the grid, unknown to our enemies. You will be comfortable there and you can continue your work remotely. But we need to move you tonight. Elena thought of her grandmother, of the nurse and doctor who had been caring for her. Rosa, my grandmother, will they target her? Already handled, Marco assured her. We moved her to a private facility this morning under an assumed name. She thinks it is a luxury recovery center, a gift from a charitable foundation you applied to. She is completely safe and will remain so. Elena sagged with relief. Whatever else Dante Salvatore was, he was a man who kept his word. When do we leave? Midnight. Pack light. We will have everything you need at the safe house. Elena returned to the ballroom to finish the day's work, but her mind was elsewhere. She had known, intellectually, that danger was always lurking at the edges of this world. But knowing and experiencing were different things. Viktor Petrov wanted to hurt Dante. She had become a pawn in a war she did not understand, and the only thing standing between her and violence was Dante's protection. That night, Elena packed her laptop, her planning materials, and a few changes of clothes. She was ready when Marco knocked at midnight. But it was not Marco who entered her room. It was Dante, dressed entirely in black, a gun visible in a holster under his jacket. Change of plans, he said without preamble. I am taking you to the safe house myself. We have intelligence that suggests Victor has someone inside our organization, someone feeding him information. I do not know who I can trust right now except Marco, and he is needed here to manage the household. Is Isabella safe? Elena asked immediately. Isabella is in New York with friends, well protected. This is about you, Elena. About keeping you alive until we can eliminate the threat. They left through a service entrance Elena had not known existed, Dante's hand on the small of her back as he guided her through dark corridors and down a hidden stairwell. A nondescript sedan waited in a garage, and Dante held the door for her before sliding behind the wheel himself. The drive was tense and silent. Dante kept checking the mirrors, taking turns that seemed random but were clearly designed to detect any tail. Elena watched the city lights give way to suburbs, then to rural darkness. Finally, nearly 90 minutes later, they pulled onto a dirt road that led to a small cottage nestled in the woods. This was my mother's retreat, Dante said as he unlocked the door. She came here when she needed space from my father's world. After she died, I kept it maintained but rarely visit. No one knows about it except Marco and now you. The cottage was cozy, decorated in a style that was warm and welcoming, completely different from the intimidating grandeur of the mansion. There was one bedroom, a small kitchen, a living area with a fireplace. It felt like a home, like a place where real people lived real lives. You will be safe here, Dante said, setting down her bag. I will stay tonight to ensure the perimeter is secure, then Marco will bring supplies and anything else you need. The gala is in 4 days. After that, once Victor is dealt with, you can go home. Elena turned to face him, suddenly overwhelmed by everything that had happened, by the fear and the strangeness and the impossible situation she found herself in. Why are you doing this, Dante? Really? I am just an event planner. I do not matter in your world. You could have paid me off, sent me away with enough money to stay quiet. Instead, you are protecting me, caring for my grandmother, risking your own safety. Why? Dante was silent for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion he was trying to suppress. Because you do matter, Elena. You matter to Isabella, who cares about you and trusts you. You matter to this gala, which matters to my sister. And you matter to me, though I have no right to say that and less right to feel it. Elena's breath caught. Dante, Do not, he interrupted. Do not say anything. You are here because I brought you into this mess, because my world touched yours and put you in danger. Whatever you think you feel, it is gratitude or Stockholm Syndrome or simple survival instinct. When this is over, when you are safe, you will go back to your life and forget about the criminal who kept you prisoner for a month. And if I do not want to forget? Elena heard herself say. What if I have seen past the monster to the man, and what if I like what I see? Dante closed his eyes as if in pain. Then you are a fool, Elena Martinez. I'm not a good man. I have done things that would make you sick if you knew the details. I have blood on my hands that will never wash clean. You deserve someone normal, someone safe, someone who can give you the life you have built for yourself without dragging you into darkness. Maybe I am tired of safe, Elena said, taking a step toward him. Maybe I am tired of building a careful, controlled life that could fall apart with one bad wedding or one unexpected crisis. Maybe I want to feel something real, even if it is dangerous. Elena, Dante warned, but he did not step back. She moved closer, close enough to see the war raging in his eyes, desire fighting with honor. You have been nothing but honorable to me, Dante. You kept your word, protected my grandmother, respected my boundaries. You could have done anything these past 3 weeks, taken advantage in 1,000 ways, but you did not. So do not tell me you are a monster when I have seen the man you really are. The man I am is dangerous for you to know, Dante said, but his resolve was cracking. Elena could see it in the way his hands clenched at his sides, in the way his gaze dropped to her lips. Then let me make my own choices about what danger I am willing to face, Elena whispered. She reached up and touched his face, her palm against his cheek. You have been alone for so long, carrying everything by yourself. Let someone in, Dante. Just for tonight, stop being the boss, stop being the protector, and just be a man who wants something for himself. The dam broke. Dante pulled her against him, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that was equal parts desperation and revelation. Elena melted into him, her arms wrapping around his neck, everything else falling away except this moment, this connection. He kissed her like a man starved, like she was air and he had been drowning. Elena responded with equal intensity, years of careful control and measured emotions exploding into pure feeling. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. This is a mistake, he said, but he did not let her go. Probably, Elena agreed. But it is my mistake to make. They stood there in the quiet cottage, holding each other, and for the first time since Elena had arrived at the Salvatore estate, she felt completely safe. Not because of Dante's power or his organization, but because of the man himself, the one who had somehow worked his way past all her defenses and into her heart despite every reason she had to keep him out. That night they talked until dawn. Dante told her about his mother, a woman who had tried to keep beauty and goodness alive in a world of ugliness and violence. Elena shared stories of her parents, of the father who had been a journalist committed to truth and the mother who had been a teacher devoted to her students. They talked about dreams deferred and paths not taken, about the weight of responsibility and the longing for freedom. And slowly, carefully, they began to imagine a future that might include both of them. I am working to legitimize the family operations, Dante admitted as the sun began to rise. Moving money into legal ventures, distancing us from the worst of the criminal activities. It will take years, maybe decades, but I want Isabella's children to inherit a clean legacy. I want to be more than what I was born to be. The wedding took place on a crisp October afternoon 6 months after that night in the ballroom. Elena had initially wanted something small and intimate, but Dante had other ideas. This would be his only wedding, he had declared, and he wanted the world to know that Elena Martinez was choosing to become Elena Salvatore. The guest list swelled to 300, a mix of Elena's small circle of friends and family, Isabella's society connections, and Dante's complicated network of associates, both legitimate and otherwise. Father Giuseppe, who had known Dante since he was a boy attending Sunday school, officiated the ceremony in the estate's garden. The old priest had pulled Dante aside before the wedding and asked him seriously if he was doing this for the right reasons, if he truly loved Elena enough to put her welfare above his own ambitions and obligations. Dante's answer had been simple. "She is the only truly good thing that has ever happened to me, Father. I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve her." Elena walked down the aisle on the arm of Marco, who had become like an uncle to her in the months since that fateful night. Her grandmother Rosa sat in the front row, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks, wearing her finest dress and the pearl necklace Elena's mother had given her decades ago. Isabella served as maid of honor, looking elegant in pale blue, her eyes shining with happiness for the brother who had sacrificed so much to ensure her own happiness. When Dante saw Elena in her wedding dress, a simple but stunning creation of silk and lace that she had designed herself with Isabella's help, his carefully maintained composure cracked. His eyes filled with tears he did not bother to hide, and when she reached him at the altar, he took her hands and whispered, "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. Thank you for choosing me." The vows they exchanged were traditional, but the emotion behind them was anything but ordinary. When Dante promised to love and cherish Elena in sickness and in health, for better or worse, everyone present knew he meant it with every fiber of his being. This was a man who had killed to protect what was his, who would burn down the world before he let anyone harm his wife. And when Elena promised to stand by Dante through all of life's challenges, to be his partner and his equal, she was promising to walk beside him through a transformation that would take years, maybe a lifetime to complete. The reception was lavish, held in the same ballroom where they had first danced. Rosa's cooking formed the centerpiece of a menu that drew from both Elena's Cuban heritage and Dante's Italian roots. The wine flowed freely, the music played late into the night, and for those few hours, it was easy to forget about the complicated realities of their world and just celebrate love. During their first dance as husband and wife, Dante pulled Elena close and murmured, "Do you remember that first night? When I forced you to dance with me and you were terrified? I remember thinking you were the most dangerous man I had ever met," Elena replied with a smile. "I was not wrong, but I was not entirely right either." "I knew that night," Dante admitted. "When you stood up to me, when you negotiated your terms like you had any leverage at all, I knew you were different. I told myself it was just intrigue, just curiosity about this woman who refused to be intimidated. But looking back, I think I was already falling in love with you. I just did not have the words for it yet." Elena's throat tightened with emotion. Even now, after months together, Dante could still surprise her with his honesty, his willingness to be vulnerable with her in ways he was with no one else. "I love you," she said simply. "Not despite what you are, but because of who you are trying to become. Thank you for being brave enough to change." The honeymoon was 2 weeks in Italy, the first real vacation either of them had taken in years. Dante showed Elena the village in Sicily where his family had originated, introduced her to distant cousins who still worked the olive groves and vineyards his great-great-grandfather had left behind. They explored Florence and Rome, standing in awe before masterpieces Elena had only seen in books. They ate incredible food, drank wine that tasted like sunshine, and made love in hotel rooms overlooking ancient cities that had seen countless generations come and go. It was in Venice, their last stop before returning home, that Elena discovered she was pregnant. She had been feeling off for a few days, attributed it to rich food and travel exhaustion, but when she missed her period, she took a test in their hotel bathroom while Dante was out arranging a gondola ride. The positive result was both expected and completely shocking. They had not been trying, but they had not been preventing either, both content to let fate decide when their family would begin. When Dante returned to find Elena sitting on the bathroom floor, test in hand, tears streaming down her face, he thought something was terribly wrong. He was across the room in an instant, dropping to his knees beside her, his hands framing her face. "What is it? What happened? Are you hurt?" Elena could not speak, could only hold up the test and watch his expression cycle through confusion, comprehension, and finally pure joy. "We are having a baby?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Elena, we are going to be parents?" "I know it is fast," Elena managed to say. "We have only been married for 2 weeks. I did not plan this, I do not know if you are ready. Dante kissed her, stopping the flow of anxious words. When he pulled back, he was smiling through tears. "Ready? My love, I have spent my entire life preparing to be alone, to shoulder responsibility by myself, to never let anyone close enough to truly know me. And then you came into my life and changed everything. You made me believe in futures that do not end in violence or betrayal. So yes, I am ready. I am terrified and overwhelmed and completely unprepared, but I am ready because I will have you beside me." They spent their last night in Venice on the balcony of their hotel room, overlooking the Grand Canal, making plans and dreaming dreams. Dante wanted a daughter who would have Elena's courage and kindness. Elena wanted a son who would have Dante's strength and hidden gentleness. They both wanted a child who would grow up knowing love and security, who would never have to choose between honor and survival the way Dante had. The pregnancy was not easy. Elena suffered from severe morning sickness for the first 4 months, could barely keep food down, lost weight instead of gaining it. Dante hired the best obstetrician in the city, arranged for round-the-clock care, canceled business trips to stay home with his wife. He learned to make ginger tea and hold her hair back and provide silent comfort when the sickness left her exhausted and discouraged. "I am supposed to be glowing," Elena complained one morning, her face pale and drawn. "Pregnant women are supposed to be radiant. I look like death." "You look beautiful," Dante insisted, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You are growing our child. There is nothing more incredible than that." Dr. Maria Russo, who had become Elena's closest friend over the months of wedding planning and business development, assured them both that the severe sickness would pass. "She is just growing a strong baby," Maria said with a smile. "Probably takes after the father." And Maria was right. At 5 months, the sickness finally eased, and Elena entered that mythical second trimester where energy returned and the pregnancy glow became real. Her business was thriving, fueled by the success of Isabella's gala and word-of-mouth recommendations from satisfied clients. She had hired 2 assistants and was actively turning down jobs, only accepting events that excited her creatively or supported causes she believed in. Dante was true to his word about legitimizing the family operations. It was a slow, dangerous process. Moving away from criminal activities meant renegotiating relationships, making enemies of people who profited from the old ways. But Dante was methodical and ruthless in his transformation. One by one he exited illegal businesses, investing the money into legitimate ventures. Real estate development. Private security firms. Import-export companies that actually imported and exported legal goods. A chain of restaurants that Rosa helped develop, bringing her incredible cooking to a wider audience. Not everyone approved. There were attempts to interfere, threats both subtle and overt. But Dante had leverage that others did not. Decades of information about competitors and rivals, secrets he could expose if pushed. Most chose to let him go rather than risk mutual destruction. The few who persisted found themselves dealing with Dante's strategic mind and Marco's loyal execution. The Salvatore family was transitioning, but they were not defenseless. The threat came when Elena was 8 months pregnant, huge and uncomfortable, counting down the days until their daughter arrived. They had learned the baby's sex at 6 months, and Dante had been impossibly tender ever since, talking to Elena's belly every night, telling their daughter about the world she would soon enter, promising to protect her always. They had settled on the name Sofia Maria, after Dante's mother and Elena's grandmother. The attack happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Elena was leaving her office, walking to her car in the parking garage, when 3 men approached. She recognized the danger immediately, had learned to read body language and threat levels during her months in Dante's world. Her hand went to the panic button on her phone, the direct line to Dante's security team that she had been instructed to always carry. But before she could press it, before the men could reach her, gunshots rang out. The attackers fell, taken down by Dante's security detail who had been shadowing Elena without her knowledge. The entire incident lasted less than 30 seconds, but the aftermath would echo for months. Elena was rushed to the hospital, not injured but in shock, her body going into early labor from the stress and adrenaline. Dante arrived at the hospital moving like a hurricane, Marco and a security team in his wake. He burst into Elena's room, his face pale, his hands shaking as he reached for her. "Are you all right? Is the baby dash?" "We are both fine," Elena assured him, though she was hooked up to monitors and in 4. "They stopped labor for now. Dr. Russo says Sofia is strong, her heart rate is good. But Dante, there were 3 of them. They were going to take me." "Who were they?" Dante's expression went cold, the monster emerging to protect what was his. "They were sent by Dominic Russo, a capo I refused to work with anymore. He thought grabbing you would force me back into business with him. He was wrong. Marco is handling it now. Russo will not threaten anyone again." "You cannot kill everyone who threatens us," Elena said, though her voice lacked conviction. She was terrified not just for herself but for their daughter. What kind of world were they bringing Sofia into? "Watch me," Dante replied grimly. "I will burn down anyone who thinks they can touch my family. I will destroy their operations, their reputations, everything." They need to understand that the Salvatore family protects its own. Dr. Russo entered the room, checking Elena's vitals and the monitors tracking the baby. The contractions have stopped for now, but we need to keep you here for observation. The next 24 hours are critical. Try to stay calm, keep your stress levels down. She gave Dante a significant look. That means no more talk of burning down enemies while your wife is trying to keep your daughter cooking a little longer. Dante had the grace to look chagrined. He pulled a chair close to Elena's bed and took her hand. I'm sorry. I am just so angry that anyone would dare dash. I know, Elena interrupted. But right now, anger does not help. What helps is you being here with me, staying calm, helping me breathe through this. So Dante stayed. He canceled everything, refused to leave Elena's side, held her hand through the long night of monitoring and worrying. Marco brought him changes of clothes and updates on the situation with Russo, which Dante dealt with via text and phone calls he took outside Elena's room. By morning, Elena's condition had stabilized, and Dr. Russo cleared her to go home with strict instructions for bed rest until the baby arrived. The next 3 weeks were the longest of Dante's life. He worked from home, set up an office in their bedroom so he could be near Elena at all times. He interviewed and hired a rotation of nurses to ensure she was never alone. He drove Dr. Russo crazy with calls and questions about every symptom, every worry. And at night, he lay beside his wife with his hand on her belly, feeling Sofia kick and move, praying to a God he was not sure still listened to men like him that both of them would come through this safely. Sofia Maria Salvatore arrived 3 weeks early on a snowy January morning. Labor started at 2 a.m., progressed rapidly, and by the time they made it to the hospital, Elena was already 8 centimeters dilated. Dr. Russo barely had time to scrub in before Sofia made her entrance into the world, howling her displeasure at being rushed. Dante cut the cord with shaking hands, tears streaming openly down his face as he watched his daughter take her first breaths. When the nurses placed Sofia in his arms, cleaned and swaddled, he stared down at her with an expression of such awe and terror that Elena's heart nearly burst. She is perfect, he whispered. Elena, she is absolutely perfect. Sofia had Dante's dark hair and Elena's nose, a scrunched-up face that promised beauty later but right now just looked angry at the world. Her lungs were clearly strong, given the volume of her cries. But when Dante held her close and murmured soothing words in Italian, she calmed, her tiny fingers wrapping around his much larger one. She knows your voice, Elena said, exhausted but radiant. You talk to her every day. She knows her papa. That first night in the hospital, Dante refused to put Sofia down. He sat in the chair beside Elena's bed, his daughter against his chest, and talked to her about everything and nothing. He promised her the world, promised to protect her always, promised to be better than his father had been. He told her about her grandmother Sofia who she was named for, about her great-grandmother Rosa who was waiting to meet her, about her Aunt Isabella who was already planning spoiling strategies. When Elena woke in the middle of the night to feed Sofia, she found Dante still awake, still holding their daughter, tears still tracking down his face. I never understood, he said quietly. My father used to say that having children made you vulnerable, gave your enemies leverage. I always thought he was talking about tactical weakness. But it is not that at all. It is that suddenly you have something so precious, so irreplaceable, that the thought of anything happening to them is unbearable. I would do anything for her, Elena. Anything. I know, Elena replied. That is what makes you a good father, Dante. That instant, fierce, protective love. But you also have to let her breathe, let her grow. You cannot protect her from everything. I can try, Dante said with a small smile. And I will. But I also promise to let her be her own person, to support her dreams even when they terrify me. She will have the freedom I never did, the chance to choose her own path. They brought Sofia home 3 days later to a house full of flowers and well-wishers. Rosa held her great-granddaughter and wept, telling her stories in Spanish about her mother and grandmother, about strong women who survived hardship and built beautiful lives. Isabella showed up with enough baby clothes to outfit quintuplets, then proceeded to demand holding privileges. Marco brought a teddy bear the size of a small car and proceeded to tear up when Sofia gripped his finger. The first year of parenthood was a blur of sleepless nights and indescribable joy. Sofia was a demanding baby, strong-willed and opinionated from the start. She had inherited her father's intensity and her mother's determination, a combination that promised interesting teenage years ahead. Dante was a surprisingly natural father, completely unafraid of diapers and midnight feedings. He would walk the floors for hours when Sofia was colicky, singing Italian lullabies his mother had sung to him, his deep voice somehow soothing when nothing else worked. Elena managed to balance motherhood and her business, though it required careful planning and the help of her expanded team. She brought Sofia to meetings when appropriate, set up a nursery in her office, and refused to apologize for being both a mother and a professional. Some clients were put off, but the ones who mattered, the ones Elena wanted to work with anyway, appreciated her authenticity and dedication. Dante continued his transformation of the family business. By Sofia's first birthday, the Salvatore empire was 70% legitimate, with clear timelines for exiting the remaining questionable ventures. It had cost him relationships and alliances, had required strategic maneuvering that sometimes kept him awake at night, but he was doing it. For Elena. For Sofia. For the future he wanted them to have. When Sofia was 18 months old, Elena discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier, her body apparently having figured out what to do the second time around. They learned early that they were having a boy, and Dante was over the moon. A son to balance their daughter, a complete family. Gabriel Antonio Salvatore arrived on a warm spring evening, 3 years almost to the day after Elena had first walked through the gates of the Salvatore estate. Where Sofia had been all fire and fury, Gabriel was calm and observant from the start. He studied the world with serious dark eyes, rarely cried, seemed content to watch and learn before acting. Elena saw Dante in him immediately, that same careful assessment before committing to action. Sofia was initially skeptical of her baby brother, this interloper who was taking up their parents' attention. But Dante handled it brilliantly, including her in every aspect of Gabriel's care, teaching her to be a big sister, making her feel essential rather than displaced. Within weeks, Sofia was fiercely protective of Gabriel, announcing to anyone who would listen that he was my baby, and they needed to be gentle with him. The years that followed were busy but beautiful. Elena's business grew to become one of the most sought-after event planning companies on the East Coast. She was featured in magazines, interviewed on podcasts, invited to speak at industry conferences. But she never forgot where she had come from, always made time for smaller clients with limited budgets, often did pro bono work for charitable causes. Dante completed his transformation. By the time Sofia started kindergarten, the Salvatore family was entirely legitimate. All criminal enterprises had been exited, all questionable associations severed. It had taken 7 years, countless negotiations and more than a few dangerous confrontations, but Dante had done it. The Salvatore empire now consisted of real estate holdings, security companies, restaurants, import businesses, and venture capital investments. On paper and in practice they were clean. The cost had been significant. Dante's relationship with his father deteriorated completely, the old man unable to accept what he saw as betrayal of family tradition and honor. Antonio Salvatore died bitter and angry, refusing to see his son in his final days. The funeral was small, attended mostly by men from the old days who whispered about how Dante had gone soft, had abandoned the ways that had built the empire he now enjoyed. But Dante had Elena beside him, her hand in his, reminding him why he had made the choices he did. He had Isabella, who had married Marco in a beautiful ceremony 2 years earlier and was now expecting their first child. He had Sofia and Gabriel, children who would grow up knowing their father as a businessman and philanthropist, not a criminal. The price was worth it. Commissioner James Torres, an honest cop who had worked with Dante during the transition to help root out corruption in the police department, became an unlikely friend. Torres had been skeptical at first, convinced Dante's reformation was a sham. But over years of careful observation and cooperation, he had come to believe in Dante's commitment to change. They worked together on community initiatives, programs to help at-risk youth, efforts to provide opportunities that might keep kids from choosing the paths Dante once walked. On Sofia's 8th birthday, Elena stood in the gardens of the Salvatore estate watching her daughter hold court over her birthday party. Sofia was fearless and charming, organizing the other children into elaborate games, settling disputes with the authority of someone twice her age. She had Dante's leadership qualities and Elena's empathy, a combination that made her magnetic. Gabriel sat under a tree with a book, content to observe rather than participate. He was thoughtful and protective, always aware of his sister's location, ready to intervene if her adventures went too far. At 5 years old, he already had the watchful nature of his father, though Elena prayed he would never need to use it the way Dante once had. Dante appeared at Elena's side, slipping his arm around her waist. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Salvatore." Elena leaned into him, marveling at how natural this had become, how completely he had integrated into her soul over the past 8 years. I was thinking about how far we have come. Do you remember that first night? When you made me dance with you and I was terrified. How could I forget? Dante replied. You were the bravest thing I had ever seen, standing up to me when you had every reason to be afraid. I fell in love with you that night, though I did not realize it until much later. I was so angry with you at the time, Elena admitted. Furious that you would put me in that position, would use fear as a tool. But looking back now, I understand. You were protecting yourself the only way you knew how. And somehow, despite everything, you still saw me. Not a threat or a pawn, but a person. I have spent my whole life reading people, looking for weaknesses and angles, Dante said. But with you, I saw strength and honesty and a kind of moral clarity I had never encountered. You made me want to be better, Elena. You still do every single day. They watched their children play, surrounded by friends and family, the air filled with laughter and joy. Rosa sat in her wheelchair near the cake table, her health failing but her spirit strong, regaling Isabella and her very pregnant belly with stories about Elena as a child. Marco supervised the bouncy castle with the seriousness of a Secret Service agent, making sure no kid bounced too high or too recklessly. Dr. Maria Russo chatted with other parents, her own 2 children adding to the chaos. This was the life they had built together, Elena thought. Not perfect, not without its complications and challenges, but real and full and worth every risk she had taken. She had started as an event planner hired for a gala and ended up planning an entire life, one infinitely more complex and rewarding than any event could ever be. Do you ever regret it? Dante asked quietly. Choosing this life, choosing me? You could have had someone safe, someone normal. Instead, you got a reformed criminal with a complicated past and enemies who might still resurface someday. Elena turned to face him fully, her hands coming up to frame his face the way she had that first night in the cottage when everything changed. I have never regretted loving you, Dante Salvatore. Not once, not even for a second. Yes, the path has been harder than it would have been with someone else. But it has also been richer, fuller, more meaningful. You challenged me to be braver than I thought possible. You showed me what real partnership looks like. You gave me these incredible children and this beautiful life. How could I ever regret that? Dante kissed her, soft and sweet, a public display of affection that would have been unthinkable for him a decade ago. When he pulled back, his eyes were suspiciously bright. I do not deserve you, but I promise to spend every day earning the gift of your love. You already have, Elena assured him. Every time you play Princess Tea Party with Sophia even though you hate pretend tea. Every time you read Gabriel the same dinosaur book for the 100th time because it is his favorite. Every time you support my work and respect my independence. Every time you choose to be the man I see in you rather than the monster you were trained to be. You earn it every single day. Sophia came running over, her party dress already sporting grass stains and frosting. Mama. Papa. It is time for cake. Come on, you are missing everything. Gabriel followed at a more sedate pace, taking Elena's hand. Can I help blow out the candles? He asked Sophia seriously. Only if you do not blow out all of them, Sophia negotiated. It is my birthday so I get to blow out most of them. But you can help with the last 2. Deal? Gabriel agreed solemnly. They gathered around the elaborate Princess Castle cake that Elena had spent hours perfecting. Everyone singing happy birthday while Sophia basked in the attention and Gabriel counted the candles to make sure there were exactly 8. When the moment came, Sophia made a wish with her eyes squeezed tight, then blew with all her might. Gabriel helped with the final 2 candles and everyone cheered. Later that night, after the guests had left and the children were finally asleep, Elena and Dante sat on their private balcony overlooking the gardens. The same gardens where Elena had first overheard that fateful confrontation 8 years ago. The same paths she had walked as a frightened captive who slowly became something more. I have been thinking, Dante said, his fingers laced through Elena's. About legacy, about what we leave behind. The business is legitimate now, our children will inherit something they can be proud of. But I want to do more. I want to establish a foundation, something that helps kids who grow up the way I did, in neighborhoods where crime seems like the only option. Give them alternatives, opportunities, hope. Elena squeezed his hand. I think that is a beautiful idea. We could call it the Sophia and Gabriel Foundation, build something for them to eventually lead when they are older. Teach them that privilege comes with responsibility, that having much means giving much. You always know exactly what to say, Dante marveled. How do you always see the best path forward? Because I am not carrying the weight you carried for so long, Elena replied. I can see clearly because you protected me, gave me the space to dream and plan and hope. But Dante, you are not that person anymore. The man who controlled through fear and violence is gone. The man you are now is someone who builds rather than destroys, who protects without dominating. You have already created an incredible legacy. The foundation would just be an extension of the transformation you have already completed. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from years of partnership and deep understanding. Elena thought about the journey that had brought them here, from that terrifying first dance to this moment of peace and contentment. There had been dark times, moments when she questioned everything, nights when Dante's past had threatened to swallow their future. But they had navigated it together, two people from completely different worlds who somehow fit perfectly. "Thank you," Dante said suddenly, "for taking a chance on a monster. For seeing past what I was to what I could become. For giving me Sophia and Gabriel. For building this life with me. Thank you for everything, Elena." "Thank you for being brave enough to change," Elena replied. "For keeping your word even when it was hard. For loving me enough to become someone new. We did this together, Dante. Every step of the way." As the moon rose over the estate, casting silver light across the gardens, Elena felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. Her life had not turned out anything like she planned. That night 8 years ago she had been terrified, trapped, certain her life was over. Instead, it had just been beginning. She had found love in the most unexpected place, had built a family she never dreamed possible, had discovered strength she did not know she possessed. The estate that had once felt like a prison now felt like home. The man who had once terrified her now completed her. The world that had seemed so dark and dangerous now held beauty and possibility. It was not a fairy tale, there had been too much struggle and fear for that. But it was something better. A real story with real challenges overcome, real love earned, real redemption achieved. Sophia's voice drifted from her bedroom window, not quite asleep yet, chattering to her stuffed animals about the party and the presents and how she was going to share her new art supplies with Gabriel. Gabriel's quieter voice responded, already protective of his sister even at 5 years old. The sound of their children's voices, safe and happy and loved, was the sweetest sound Dante and Elena had ever heard. "Come on," Elena said, standing and pulling Dante to his feet. "Let us go check on them one more time before we sleep." They walked through the house together, hand in hand, checking on their sleeping children, straightening blankets, placing gentle kisses on foreheads. This was their empire now, Elena thought. Not built on fear or violence or criminal enterprise, but on love and partnership and the courage to change. It was an empire that would last because it was built on something real, something that could not be destroyed by rivals or betrayed by associates or corrupted by power. As they returned to their own bedroom, Dante pulled Elena close one more time. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "Today, tomorrow and every day after. You are my redemption, Elena Salvatore. You are everything good I never thought I deserved. And you are my greatest adventure," Elena replied. "The risk I will never regret taking. I love you too, Dante. Always." They climbed into bed together, Elena fitting perfectly into the curve of Dante's body, his arms secure around her waist. Outside, the estate security made their rounds, the gardens rustled with night breezes, the world continued its eternal rotation. But inside this room, in this bed, two people who should never have found each other had created something miraculous. The event planner and the Mafia boss. The woman seeking security and the man seeking redemption. Together, they had built an empire of love that would outlast any criminal organization, any business venture, any worldly success. They had created a family, a legacy, a future bright with possibility. And it had all started with a dance. With a threat that became a promise. With a man who said, "Dance with me or I will lose my patience," and a woman brave enough to take his hand despite her fear. From that single moment of courage, an entire life had bloomed, proving that sometimes the most dangerous choice is exactly the right one. As Elena drifted off to sleep, safe in her husband's arms, their children sleeping peacefully down the hall, their future stretching bright and clean before them, she smiled. She had come to plan an event and ended up planning a lifetime. And she would not change a single terrifying, beautiful, transformative moment of it.